In this video, we are going to learn about the poem Small Towns and the River in ISC syllabus class 12 this year, written by Mamang Dai. See, if we talk about the title of the poem, it is an appropriate title. Why? Because actually the title talks about two things. One is the small towns, and the second thing that it talks about is the river. So, as I told you, the title is very appropriate for a reason that actually the poem is about the contrast between the transient and eternal. Now, transient nature of human life, transient means impermanent. Transient means which is there for a short period of time, right? So, it talks about two things. One is transience, and second is eternity. Transient nature of human life, which is represented by small towns. Small towns represent transient nature of human life, mortal life, because human life is mortal. We are here on this earth for a fixed period of time, and after that we will die. And the river represents eternity of nature. When the poet talks about small towns in the poem, you will find that the town has been vividly portrayed, calling it unchanging, dull, having gloomy character, all right, gloomy nature. While on the other hand, the river with permanence, though it is ever moving, flowing, and it keeps changing its entity, but still there is a factor of eternity associated with the river. So, if we talk about the theme of the poem, what is the poem about? Actually, the poem presents the contrast between the transient nature of human life and the eternity of nature. Alright, now let's continue with the poem. So, the poem can be divided into 6 different paragraphs. Look at the first one. Small towns always remind me of death. My hometown lies calmly amidst the trees. It is always the same, in summer or winter, with the dust flying or the wind howling down the gorge. So, in these lines, we find the description of a town which is the poet's hometown. Alright? So, the poem begins with a paradox. Now, what is a paradox? Paradox is a statement which appears contradictory, right? Small towns always remind me of death. How is it contradictory? Towns are made up of people who are alive. But why is it that the poet is reminded of death when but why is it that the poet is reminded of death when she sees when she sees small towns? So she says it is her own personal notion that small towns always remind her of death, which is a paradox, contradictory. Why? Because towns are made up of people. We find population there. But what she is reminded of? She is reminded of death. So by this word death here, she means dullness. By this word death here, she means that transient nature of human life, right? Now, in the next sentence, she talks about her own hometown. She says, my hometown lies calmly amidst the trees. There are so many trees. So she talks about her hometown, which lies calmly, peacefully, silently amidst the trees, among the trees. It is always the same. It is always the same. She is not able to see any change over there. Constancy, she talks about. Okay, she is talking about constancy here. It's constant. It is always the same in summer or winter, whatever the weather is, with the dust flying or the wind howling down the gorge. Now, please note here, dust flying. Dust is again, you can understand when a town is dusty or when there is a wind howling. Is also representing a very gloomy atmosphere, right? Flying dust or the wind howling down the gorge, they do not make any impact on the town. The town is same. Dust is another symbol of death, while the howling wind creates glooming atmosphere. But the town is not affected by the dust or the wind. Alright, dust or wind, which are natural phenomena. But the town is not affected. Town is constant. Town is the same. Alright, though it has trees which belong to nature, though it has dust flying over there, though the wind is also there howling, but howling wind symbolic of gloominess, even dust symbolic of death. Alright, they do not change the entity of the town. The town is constant, the town is the same. Alright, so that is why the poet says that the towns remind her of death. Why? Because there is no change, it's constant. Okay, now the second stanza she talks about. Now look at what she says in second stanza. Just the other day someone died. In the dreadful silence we wept, looking at the sad wreath of tube roses. Life and death, only the rituals are permanent. Now she talks about an instance, and that is the instance of someone's death in the town. Just the other day, someone died. In the dreadful silence. Why dreadful silence? Of course, because when someone dies, so everybody is quiet, unpleasant. So dreadful here represents unpleasantness of atmosphere at that time. In the dreadful silence, we wept. So we means collectively, she is talking about not only about herself, she is talking about other people of the town as well. Right? So in the dreadful silence, we wept, looking at the sad wreath of tuberoses. Tuberoses are white flowers, and here they are agents of death, because tuberoses, these flowers are used, to be put in the arrangement. Wreath is the arrangement of flowers in a circular shape, and that wreath is made up of white flowers when you are offering it to a dead body. Okay, so she says that we all wept in that dreadful silence, looking at that sad wreath of tuberoses. Life and death, they keep changing. But the only permanent thing is the rituals that are performed. Right? So now when she is talking about the town, she talks of constancy. She talks of an unchanged entity. Alright, she talks of it very, very depressing and gloomy, having very gloomy atmosphere, and nothing can change it. Now, she switches to another natural entity, that is a river. Now she talks about a river. So she says, the river has a soul. In the summer, it cuts through the land like a torrent of grief. Sometimes I think it holds its breath seeking a land of fish and stars. The river has a soul. It knows stretching past the town from the first drop of rain to dry earth and mist on the mountain tops. The river knows the immortality of water. In this stanza, we find that she talks about a river. She calls it the river. Why? Because it is a river which passes through the town. Okay, which is the river that she must have seen frequently, right? So she says, the river has a soul. She finds life in the river. The way the town is lifeless, the way the town is dull and gloomy, there is life in the river. Right? She says, the river has a soul. And then, so in this stanza, she is portraying the contrast, right? In earlier stanzas, she talked about the transience of human life, right? Why? The way town is representative of human life. There are people, humans living over there, but their life is impermanent. It's not permanent, it's impermanent. With dullness, with constancy. Why is it impermanent? Because they do not change, right? That's why it is like that. But now she presents a contrast of that transience of human life with eternity of nature, representing it primarily by the river. The river, and you see, In fact, the river is personified here. She says that it has a soul, as if it has a life, right? So she personifies the river, and then she says, in the summer, the river makes its way. It cuts through the land, means it makes its way through the land, so forceful in making its way by cutting through the land, like a torrent of grief. टॉरेंट इज वेरी सडन एंड अब्रप्ट फ्लो. अचानक से जब कोई चीज एकदम से फ्लो होती है, हाँ, सो लाइक अ टॉरेंट ऑफ ग्रीफ. शी कंपेयर्स दैट टॉरेंट, दैट सडन फ्लो ऑफ द रिवर with the torrent of grief. You know, it uses such a force that it seems like a person pouring out his grief. You know, sometimes you have that storm of emotion, and suddenly that storm of emotion is vented out, right? Sometimes I think it holds its breath, seeking a land of fish and stars. Here, when it says na that a torrent of grief, so what kind of grief? What kind of sadness? Sadness of its water getting polluted. Done by whom? Done by us, humans only. It is also suggestive of the possibility of drought or water scarcity that come with overwhelming heat in the summer season. At times, it becomes too much for the river. At times, I think it holds its breath. It here refers to the river seeking a land of fish and stars. Sometimes it becomes so difficult for the river, it becomes too much for the river to hold its breath, for it feels choked and suffocated with filth and dirt, and it longs to have clear water in which fish can be seen during daytime, in which the reflection of stars can be seen at night. So the river longs for such water. Alright, through this the poet is trying to bring forward the notion of water pollution. The river has a soul, it knows, stretching past the town, from the first drop of rain to dry earth and mist on the mountain tops. The river knows the immortality of water. Again, the stanza begins with the refrain, the river has a soul. The river flows through the land beyond the small town. Stretching past the town means beyond the small town, the town, her hometown she is talking about, right? It knows from the first drop of rain to dry earth. So the river experiences, it knows means it experiences the first drop of rain on the dry surface to dry earth. The first drop of rain, how it feels when the first drop of rain falls on the dry earth, and mist on the mountain tops, and understands the mist on the mountain tops, you know. So it is the water cycle. When the mist on the mountain tops, it changes into clouds, and then clouds in the form of rain, they bring water to the earth, dry earth, right? The river knows the immortality of water. The river understands that water never dries up. The water cycle continues from mountains to rivers and seas and to clouds and rain back to the land. The river understands that. Alright? However, while the water is permanent, the river is physically on the move. Right? The river changes its shape. The river changes its entity. Water never does that. River understands it. Okay? River understands. So a contrast is drawn between the sedentary town and the moving river, suggesting the immortality of nature. A shrine of pictures marks the days of childhood. Small towns grow with anxiety for the future. The dead are placed pointing west. When the soul rises, it will walk into the golden east, into the house of the sun. In these lines, we find that the poet is remembering her happy childhood days. Okay, so she says, a shrine of happy pictures. Shrine is actually a holy sacred place. A shrine of happy pictures marks the days of childhood. So the days of childhood are like a holy place of happy pictures. Happy pictures of what? Happy pictures of her childhood. When she was a child, how happy she used to be. So that place is like a shrine for her. It is a holy sacred place. Small towns grow with anxiety for the future. So, childhood is supposed to be the happiest and carefree time of one's life, which doesn't have any harsh facts of life, it doesn't have any fear of the unknown. Happy pictures here refer to the purity of soul in the beginning, which is childhood. Alright, that is why happy pictures are enshrined. But when these children grow into adults, they lose their childhood. Why do they lose their childhood? Because they are burdened with anxieties. They are burdened with anxieties, and that is why the entire town gets worried for the future. Okay? So that is why she says, na, small towns grow with anxiety for the future. Now it is symbolic of the fear. Anxieties of the fear is fear and insecurity about the future. It is the fear of traditions and rituals sometimes which become obsolete under the threat of modernization. Right? So there are certain rituals that everybody has to follow. They keep following that without even knowing their logics, and sometimes they are barriers in their growth. And sometimes on the name of modernization, they have to change themselves even if they want to or don't want to. Right? So these people, when they were children, the same people, when they were children, they used to be happy. But when they become adults, they are full of insecurities and fear, and that is why they are sad and gloomy. And that is why the town also becomes the same kind of place, because town is what the people make of it, isn't it? The dead are placed pointing west. Now she talks about a ritual, for example. The dead are placed pointing west. When the soul rises, it will walk into the golden east. Now the poet here goes on to mention the ritual of placing a dead body. So, when a person dies, his head is pointed towards westward. Why? So that when the soul rises, it goes towards the east. East, which is known as golden east, and golden east here means heaven. Golden east here means heaven. So the head of the dead body is kept towards the west, so that when the soul rises, it goes towards the golden east, that is heaven, into the house of sun. Heaven, which is the house of sun. The rising sun symbolizes a new day, a new beginning, and rebirth. Thus the poet conveys the immortality of human soul. Right? It is hope of shedding the anxiety for the future to rising into the house of the sun, into the golden east, which is reassuring. It's a kind of reassurance that we get. Alright? So when a person dies, he gets rid of all fears, anxieties, sadness, dullness, whatever was there in his life, and the soul rises to make a new beginning, to get rebirth and then get a new life. In the cool bamboo, restored in sunlight, life matters like this. In small towns by the river, we all want to walk with the gods. In the cool bamboos, now please understand, cool bamboo here is the metaphor used for human body. It's a metaphor used for human body. In the cool bamboo, restored in sunlight, life matters like this. So, in these last lines, there is a there is a feeling of optimism that we find. This stanza changes the mood to optimism, positivity, with a reference to sunlight, warming the cool bamboo. The bamboo symbolizes the body, whereas the sunlight represents soul. Sunlight here represents soul. So, soul is restored in the body. Alright, soul is always there in the body. Life matters like this. And that is why life is important. Life is important, as the sunlight is important for the plants. So the soul is important for the body, because the body has its relevance, the body has a life till the soul is there inside it, right? In small towns by the river, we all want to walk with the gods. So, in these last two lines of the poem, in small towns by the river, we all want to walk with the gods, the poet transplants her dull thoughts, her gloomy thoughts, with thoughts of spirituality and afterlife. Here she refers to not just her town, but small towns by the river. Generally, she is not talking about her hometown only in these lines. She is talking about small towns by the river. All right. Uh, Actually, she acknowledges the fact that people living in small towns, they want to walk with the gods, which means that they wish to live peacefully with gods rather than entering a body. So it is suggestive of immortality of soul, quite in contrast to the cycle of life and death. This stanza highlights that the poet believes in afterlife and eternal bliss. She doesn't want, and she says it through the people, that people also do not want this cycle of life and death. They want to gain eternity by living with the gods only. They do not want to come to this human life again and again and then die and then take a birth. They want to walk with the gods so that they become immortal, so that they become eternal. I hope the poem is clear.